So there's just a lot of still physical labor. And I think we've lost that in the sense of, my point is that we mustn't feel guilty about the conveniences that we have, but we shouldn't just now sit back and say, oh, I've got the convenience, I've got the can of green beans that I can just dump. That's fine. Use your can of green beans. There's nothing wrong with that. But you have now margin in your life for a little bit extra. Just start small and do what you can do. Do what you're already doing and just expand it a little bit. And then from there, the Lord will expand you again. And then the Lord will expand you again. Then you look back in your life after 10 years and you're like, wow, I can't believe I'm doing that. Wow.
Hey ladies, welcome back to Faithful and Flourishing Podcast. I'm really excited about our guest today. It's Rebecca Staal from On a Farm in Africa. If you follow her on Instagram, you know that she is the, I don't know if you would call it owner, or she's the face behind SAKAMANA, which is a nonprofit organization where she helps feeds hundreds, now a lot of Zambian children. And I am just so inspired by her. And I'm really excited about our topic today. We are going to be talking about making room for more in your life, because I think a lot of times as moms, we kind of get weighed down under the pressures of running our homes, raising our children, homeschooling, if you homeschool. And sometimes it just feels like there is no time for anything else. And Rebecca has found a way to do the anything else. And I just think it's very inspiring. And I'm looking so forward to hearing what she has to share with us. So please introduce us. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Rebecca. We're excited to hear from you today.
Hi, Sarah. Thank you so much for interviewing me. It's really a privilege and an honor, and to share what the Lord has laid on my heart. So I'm Rebecca. You can hear by an accent, I'm an American, and I live on a farm in Africa. I'm actually in Zambia, which is a small country, a few countries above South Africa, but below the Sahara Desert. So we call it the Sub-Sahara Africa is where we're located. And I'm just in a quiet little town called Kabwe. It's not remote at all, but I'm about 2 hours from the capital city, Lusaka, and our farm is right on the famous Cape to Cairo road. So there's a lot of people who do these journeys from Cape Town all the way up to Cairo, and if you ever do that, you will go right past our farm. I live on a farm in Africa. I'm a dairy farmer's wife. My husband is Zambian, and our kids have dual citizenship. So they have a little bit of an American accent and a little bit of a Zambian accent. I'm not sure what you hear.
Well, I'm going to cut in right here, because I always crack up, because you always say on Instagram, you've shared like your kids will say, we're not Americans, we're Zambians.
Yes, they do. They really do say that. Although they love America, they love visiting America, because when we go to America, there's like so much fun things. And so for them, America is like A+. But yeah, they really aren't necessarily American kids. They're very much TCKs, which is third culture kids. They just don't know it.
We grew up together. So, and you were a little bit older, so we weren't, hanging out all the time, but our parents were friends. You didn't get married till you were 30. So it was just really neat to watch how God worked in your life. And you end up in Africa. That is just the craziest thing. So crazy.
I always wanted to move to the South, and I say that God did answer my prayers. He just moved me south of the equator. So I got my prayers answered.
I like following along on your Instagram account as far as with you being in Africa, because I know a lot of times we think of Africa as this big scary place and snakes and bugs and everything else, but you make it very normal. It's very normal to live there, and you really, really enjoy the slow living. And I guess slow living would be what we would call that, right? I mean, your life is full, but you're not. It's different than America. Very different.
For sure.
And then, of course, the health benefits. We talk about that often as far as the not non-processed food you're getting. I mean, you're picking up, I was thinking about that this morning too. I think yesterday or today you posted a video picking up bananas from the market. How awesome is that they're getting fresh in season fruit? It's not like you're going to the grocery store and buying something from 1,000 miles away for those kids. Anyways, so really excited to I just love following along, love all the adventures in Africa. And I always live vicariously through you, because when I was a little girl, if you asked me what I wanted to be, I would have said a missionary to Africa. And I know you're not a missionary. I know that's something you've talked about too. We're not a missionary, but I've always wanted to be, to live in Africa at some point. So when I watch all your videos with the cows and everything, I'm like, oh, yay. So
I have to input real quick and say that there are scary elements of living here. And it's not that I try to create a false image on my Instagram account, but I believe that no matter where the Lord puts you, even if it's an urban environment that can be a little bit scary or whatnot, or in a foreign country, it can still be fun and exciting, and it can still be beautiful. I mean, just now, before we started this podcast, I went outside and there's bees swarming, and I didn't want to get stung like right before I came on. So I just like had to go back inside. So we have bees swarming sometimes. We do sometimes have snakes, not very often, hardly ever. And I definitely don't like to talk about it because people just think that there's snakes like underneath every single cushion, and that's just not how it is. But I found that the smallest thing here feels like so big if I portray it to a first worlder. And so I try to keep those down, but be honest. So it's not a perfect life, but yes, it is an amazing life. And I have to give credit to the Lord, because honestly, if you're not where God has you, you're not going to think it's amazing. So
right,
it doesn't.
Right.
So what does that blogger say, or the Instagrammer, M is for Mama?
Hard is not the same thing as bad.
Hard is not the same thing as bad. It is. That's just because hard is not means bad. So
yes, I love that. I'm in the middle of that book actually right now. So such good thoughts is what I'm trying to say. And also I was thinking when you were talking, I know growing up, we heard the quote all the time: the safest place to be is in the center of God's will. So it doesn't matter what you're going through, as long as you're doing what God wants you to do, he's got you. He's got you. So anyways, okay, well, let's get into our conversation today, because I'm really excited about this topic. I think I mentioned earlier, as moms, we just feel so busy. Mm-hmm. However, this happened to me, and I'm sure this has happened to you, but it feels like you get to a point once you've been married and you've had kids, and you get to a point where you've got your basic life under control. I'm keeping up with my laundry. I'm keeping up with my kids. I'm keeping up with my husband. I'm keeping up with my home. And you almost come to a point, at least for me, where I was bored, and I thought, man, I need something more. I want something more. And that today's conversation is an encouragement to do the more. So I'm going to let you take it from here, Rebecca.
Okay, well, it's been a gradual journey. It's definitely not been anything that's overnight. And first of all, I just want to say that I hope that nothing that I say today comes across as judgmental, because that's not my heart. But of course, as a first worlder, moving to a third world country and seeing so much poverty, I mean, without fail, if I'm having a tough day, things are just going wrong, and I drive to town for something, I will see no less than 3 people on the side of the road that are either mad. So that's what we say for a crazy person. I'm also not politically correct, so I hope I say the correct words and words. My American lingo has also gone, so I hope you understand all the words I'm saying. But anyways, a mad person or a crippled person. And it's just a visual reminder of how good my life is. There is just so much poverty and suffering around me on a daily basis. So especially as a first worlder, you move here, you see it, it's heart-wrenching. You want to fix it all. You can't. You figure out real quickly you can't fix it all. And then it becomes overwhelming and a burden, like, okay, I've got so much, or I wish I could help them, but what can I do? I quickly figured out, I can't help everybody. So in my mind, I set up what I called fences. The first was my family, obviously. The next was all of our employees' kids and the kids in this area. And then the other fence was my Sunday school kids. And if they didn't fall within those fences, then unfortunately, I probably wasn't called to help them, because just within that, I've mentioned now hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of kids just within those fences, and thousands of needs. And so anyways, these was born within 18 or 19 months that I got married. So I started having my baby straight away. Jules was born like two years later. And then just still settling in. It took me a little while because remember, I'm not married to an American. I'm married to a Zambian. So it wasn't just new marriage and babies. It was cultural, not only the
Yeah.
culture of the country, but then also all of my in-laws, we all live on a family farm together, all obviously different houses in different places, and we have our own lives and all that, but there's a family culture that comes along with that. And my family was super private, and my in-laws are super embracing and just embrace you. And it was just like a lot of overwhelm. It was overwhelming for a long time. And then 2019 was like our worst year ever. Just so many things went wrong, and we lost well, the first one was we got foot and mouth disease where we lost half of our cattle. And then on that, like 3 days later, my husband's niece died tragically. And I was in the States kissing my mom goodbye for the last time. And then my mom passed away like 8 weeks later after her double heart and kidney transplant. That didn't work. But it was time for the Lord to take her home. And then there was more things I could just talk to you for an hour what went wrong that year. And then 2020, that's when COVID hit. And actually, we were like the 5% of the world population where we benefited from COVID, because all of a sudden after 2019, where life was just so tough and everything kind of shut down. Well, we didn't have lockdowns here, but we had like slowdowns. Everything was just slow. And our life just came nearly to a screeching halt. We were still working, we were still milking our cows and all of that kind of stuff, but we had time to breathe and to heal. And now I'm forgetting if it was in July of 2020. I think it was July of 2020 that I got the idea of opening an Etsy shop and doing drop printing, which I don't even know if that's even profitable anymore. But anyways, figured out the costings and said, okay, if I can sell an item, with each item, I can buy a tray of eggs for the kids that live outside the farm gate. And so that started that. So I had some faithful friends who bought some things from me. And then I got my first donation. Okay, so I have to back up a little bit. The Lord laid on my heart to go ahead and start doing eggs 5 days a week that I could float out of my own money. Like, I'd figured it out how much it costs for a tray of eggs. So a tray of eggs is 30 eggs. And I hadn't told anyone. I don't even think I told Leon. And I was chatting with my aunt a few days later, and a pastor at her church, she was just chatting with him, and she mentioned about my egg project, and he gave a $50 check, and that was the start of SAKAMANA. And that's when I knew the Lord was like, this is the way, walk in it, because I hadn't told anybody. And it was just like, I felt like I stepped out on faith to float this project on my own. And the Lord provided without me even asking. Like, I didn't even say, Lord, please provide funding. I was just like, okay, I can do it, And then that Christmas, I'm sure you might remember, I designed some tote bags and said, okay, if I can sell 30 tote bags, I'll buy 30 kids a pair of shoes. And I remember your daughter, she donated some money for that. And I was able to buy a lot more than 30 kids a pair of shoes. I think we did Christmas boxes, and it was just the whole thing. Then the nonprofit, we finalized at the very end of 2021. So technically 2022 is when the nonprofit opened. And then we were officially a 501c3, and we could take donations and start reaching kids. And that's how it all started. Yeah. So it's totally a God thing, because I can promise you, I do not look at the kids that we serve Monday through Friday and think that it was me, because I don't really feel like I've put a lot of effort in it, in the sense of like, I haven't been out. I'm not a missionary. I'm not presenting at, and I'm not even okay, so there's missionaries of the gospel, and then there's like social missionaries that are doing work in that sense. I'm not doing anything. I barely fundraising. And it's like God just keeps dumping the blessings on us, and it's just really humbling. And it's a blessing. It's a blessing to serve, because it's God. It's not me.
And
sure.
I was gonna say I was gonna say something, but I didn't want to cut you off. You said God just opened the way, and I think that is so important for us as mothers, because sometimes, I remember getting to that point where I'm like, I'm supposed to do something more. What can I do? And I remember early on when we were first married, I'm trying to start a cookie business. I tried so many different businesses. And they did not work. And I think it's so important to follow the Lord's leading. And especially too, if you feel like, well, I don't have time. I remember I interviewed Dina, royalty. And I remember talking to her several years ago about like my burden to want to do more. And there wasn't time. And I remember her saying, if God wants you to do it, he'll make a way for you to have the time to do it. And I think that is just so not only providing, like you mentioned, but he gives you the time to do it.
For sure. Yeah, for sure. And I mean, there has been a pathway, like you asked me to share some books, so I can share these again at the end. But in 2017, I read Even Exile. I bought that when I was in the States, and that was so impactful for me. So I'm
Such
not
a good book.
Oh my goodness, I love this book. So it started off a bit slow for me, and at first I didn't really enjoy it, but somehow it was captivating enough to keep me going, because she goes through the history of feminism.
Yes.
And then it's practical all of a sudden, and you're like,
Yes.
oh, this is where she's going. So I bookmarked two things to talk. So first of all, on page 74, she talks about her husband's great grandmother and how she had lived through World War I, and how she, you know, had a garden and canning and making quilts and all that kind of stuff. And then she said that it was a risk. Her life was a risk because it was up to her to make sure she put in the garden and canned the vegetables for wintertime and made the quilts so that her family wasn't cold. And I'm sitting here thinking, okay, I know I live in a third world country, but I mean, I have modern conveniences too. I mean, I have running water, I have an oven, I have a gas stove, I have a refrigerator. I can go shopping every 2 weeks and stockpile. Like, I am not faced with the same challenges that just 2 or 3 generations ago women were faced. Right. Now, why am I burdened down by the load of housework? Really, let's be honest.
Yes.
With myself. Like, and then another thing she says, I know this is just an author, it's not the Bible, but still, she says, the first and most obvious thing God made us to do is work hard. Yes. And then she talks about in the Garden of Eden, even before the fall, that God told Adam to subdue it, which is work, and work is honorable. So there's nothing wrong with working hard. Now, I definitely think it can be an idol. And I definitely think that it can get out of control. I definitely think we can work too much. All of that. But I can talk about that later, and especially in one of the questions that one of your viewers asked. I'll cover the resting part. But yeah, we were made to work and work hard, and we shouldn't feel guilty about working, especially if God gave us that. Some of us do have these personalities that are more active.
Go get them.
Yeah, some people are, some people aren't. That's fine. But if God's blessed you with that, and if he's made the way straight, then go walk in it. Don't feel bad about maybe you're doing more than someone else. Who cares? Just do what God wants you to do and enjoy it. Yeah.
Well, and adding to that work, something just from the health standpoint, you know, we've talked a lot about health, and I know people who are friends of mine on Instagram have followed my health journey. And just that particular standpoint about health, we need work for health. Very interesting. So there's so many stats about how much your average, particularly American, but you know, your average person sits in a day. And I remember several months ago, I was listening to a podcast or something, and he was talking about different things that we can do. And one of them was for our health. And one of them was to do as much as you can standing up, or like getting walks in, like, you know, for example, the chicken eggs, right? Going to get the chicken eggs. We have to walk down a hill and come back. Sometimes we'll just put that off and put that off. And in my mind, it's like, I want to take advantage of that free exercise, you know what I'm saying, in a day. So I can walk down the hill, walk back up. I can wash my dishes by hand. I can do all of these things and take real pleasure in doing this. And it's so exciting to be able to do that. Just simply from the health side of things, it's so important that we are up and moving. And so that's just something I've challenged myself with in particular, as far as, okay, like really taking note of how much I'm sitting in a day. Even something as simple as homeschooling. Okay, we have to sit. Well, we don't have to, but we sit a lot homeschooling. Well, why can't we do a lot of read alouds for homeschooling? So a lot of times E will be on her swing and I will be out there by her reading aloud. I don't have to sit in my comfort and ease. And I think comfort has been such a hindrance to our modern world, such a hindrance to everything, hindrance to health, hindrance to our productivity and diligence and things like that. So I love that you hit on that because no, I know me myself, I'm so lazy and I know that I can do better. I can work harder. And again, not making it an idol, but I can do better.
Yeah. And then too, also because of I'm living in a third world country where there's a lot of poverty, not everyone, obviously there's different levels of poverty and income levels, just like there's in the States, but there's the women here also work hard. And I mean, there's still a lot of carrying the water from either a community well or from a water location within their community, like a town, like if they live in town, there will be a point where they can buy water. There's a lot of water carrying going on. There's a lot of still planting and getting, they call it relish, which is cabbage or anything, spinach, things like that they cut up really thin and then cook for their meal. So there's just a lot of still physical labor. And I think we've lost that in the sense of, my point is that we mustn't feel guilty about the conveniences that we have, but we shouldn't just now sit back and say, oh, I've got the convenience, I've got the can of green beans that I can just dump. That's fine. Use your can of green beans. There's nothing wrong with that. But you have now margin in your life for a little bit extra. And obviously there's seasons. We don't need to belabor that point. If you have littles and all that kind of stuff, there's seasons. My kids are bigger now. So I have a little bit more freedom, but I've still, homeschooling in the middle of thick of homeschooling. So there's still a lot for me, but I do have more margin than I did, back in 2019, when the kids were small. So anyways, yeah, their modern conveniences should be used for good, not for a retreat in that sense. Yeah.
All right. First question. Did you feel a pull to do something more than being a mom and homemaker, or did SAKAMANA fall into your lap?
Okay, well, I think it's goes back to the introduction. Like, obviously moving here, I knew I wanted to do something, but it just wasn't the timing. So it did definitely just fall into my lap. And as far as wanting to do something, I don't know. The farmers' wives here that I know are all like what I call them, like amazing Proverbs 31 women. Most of them have a side gig of some sorts, whether it's having cattle, having sheep, the bookkeeping. Most of the farmers' wives do bookkeeping for their husbands, for the farm and the payroll and all of that. Some of them do crafting, like have looms and make things. They're on top of all the entertaining that goes along with living here, because we don't have a lot of entertainment things to do. So your entertaining comes from what you create for yourself. So it's not like I was necessarily looking for work in that sense, but I was just looking to be busy. And that's something that my husband encouraged me before we got married. It's just whatever you need to do, you just need to stay busy, because the women who are the happiest here are the ones who are the busiest. If you're just sitting around twiddling your thumbs, you're going to be so homesick. And it's absolutely true. So like I took a cake decorating course before I moved here. I didn't take anything else. I thought before I was married that I would maybe have a cake decorating business, but long story, that didn't work out. I didn't really know what I was going to do. I had no plans in that sense. So yeah, SAKAMANA did kind of fall into my lap, but it was a progression. There were steps, just didn't happen immediately, for sure.
Yeah. Well, and you mentioned living there, people who are the busiest are the happiest, but I think that's everywhere. Now you're trying to avoid homesickness, but even here, when we're here at home, the most miserable people are those who are not busy. And I think there's a question about the phone, but I think as far as in our culture, the phones have an access to, just scrolling or video games or whatever, that just hurts us so much as far as happiness. I mean, I think I heard a stat recently, 1 in every 4 women are on antidepressants. And that's not the way God created us to be. And there's so much that goes into that. But yes, so being busy, working hard, those are your happiest people. Yes. And they always say, if you need to find someone to do a job, give it to the busiest person, because they find a way to get it done. And it's just so important. I love that we're talking about this, being diligent with the things that God has given us.
Yes.
All right. What do you say no to in order to prioritize the yeses? Love this one.
Okay, yes. So I would say that it's not that I'm saying no to anything necessarily, but just it's built into our culture here because life just kind of shuts down at night. We do go over to friends' house sometimes for dinner at night, or go out for dinner. There's a few places in town that we can go out for dinner, but just generally all the shops close at 5, and then the grocery store closes at 8. And the roads are dangerous at night. So our family rule is that we're not out on the roads, like unless we're within town. We don't travel long distances on the roads for safety reasons. And so our lives just automatically slow down. So I already have no's built in without even trying. And I just think that's one advantage of living here in that sense. Slow living is just the way we do it. Like, so it's very busy in the morning, kind of slows down around lunchtime, and then picks back up, finishes the day, supper time, and then it's absolutely chilled. And that's where our rest comes in. Yeah, so I think that's a blessing in disguise because I don't have to fight for, I can't go to Walmart at 10 o'clock at night. There's just not an option. I have to get my grocery shopping done in the morning, preferably in the morning, because in the afternoon it's super hot typically, especially this time of the year, and it's very busy and it can be extremely frustrating sometimes, the traffic and everything. So it's just better to go in the morning. So you're just forced to do things like that. So I think those are the no's. I don't really think that I'm denying myself anything or actually having to make conscious decisions. They're just built into our lifestyle here.
Yes. So here in America, I noticed that too. Again, going back to the health conversation, like you said, fighting. You have to really fight here in America for a healthy lifestyle. And I keep bringing up the health because health has a lot to do with what we're doing with our hours. And so if you're feeling bad, you're not going to be making the most of your time because you feel bad. I can speak from experience. But when you're feeling good and you're like, man, I've got the energy to do all this stuff, you have to really fight. And it's the same thing for our time. We have to fight for our time. So, for example, you mentioned shutting things down things naturally shut down in the evening. Here, it's like, okay, we're not going out of the house. And again, this comes down to priorities for us here. Like, family is a priority. So we're having family dinner. We're going to maybe, have a family movie night or something. We're going to prioritize our family. So life, like social life, it shuts down after dinner or at dinner or whatever. You just really have to fight for those things. Same thing with bedtimes. Homeschooling, my husband is a night owl and my daughter potentially is a night owl. She used to be, and we had to shut it down. I had to say, no, look, if you want to get up early and get your school stuff done, you can't be going to bed at 11 o'clock. Because what would happen is she'd get all frustrated. She woke up at 8. I said, well, you're going to wake up at 8 if you're going to bed at 11. So she has learned this year, especially, she's learned the value of going to bed early and getting up early. She's getting up an hour earlier than she's supposed to because she's realized, oh, if I get up an hour earlier, I can be diligent and get all my work done. And then I have all this time to do, whatever I want to do in the afternoon. So it's just, yes, it is such a fight here. I
want to insert here that I do have sympathy for all of you ladies in America, because when we do go on holiday, I'm like, how on earth? I feel the busyness and I'm just there on holiday. I'm on holiday. It is so hectic. The food thing, the food battles, how much you have to fight to eat healthy. Like I said, you have to be very careful not to compare my life to yours. You maybe can take inspiration, but I have been forced to be healthy. I have no other option. I don't have McDonald's on every single corner. I don't have Chick-fil-A. As much as I miss Chick-fil-A and yummy pizza, I have to make it myself. So I really do, just in the sometimes 2 weeks that I'm in the States, I'm like, good night. If I lived here, I for sure would not have the same lifestyle. So just must take inspiration and not feel overwhelmed by my lifestyle, because it's very different. Yeah. Give yourself grace is what I'm trying to say.
Yes. Yeah. Sure. And you can create that sort of life for yourself here. I mean, there's a lot of people who give inspiration as far as, slow living and things like that. I think of Farmhouse on Boone, Lisa. Do you follow her or read any of her things?
No, I don't.
I like seeing her YouTube. And again, she's your everyday American. They live out on the farm, but I like getting inspiration from people like that because they inspire me to work harder, to plant, to have a garden, to do all these things. That it's so funny that it's called slow living, because in slow living, you're actually working a lot harder.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So especially, I feel like here in the States, you have to fight for slow living, but slow living means cooking from scratch, finding your food from, either your local farmer's market or your local farmer, getting a cow from your butcher, planting a garden. There's a lot of work that goes into slow living, but it is very beautiful. And then I'm tying that back to having time to do the extra. It's weird because it's like your time is taken up more by everyday things, but then somehow there's margin for, doing something like what you're doing, or, whatever you want to do. If you want to start a hobby or a side gig or anything. I like that. I love that you mentioned the Proverbs 31 woman earlier, because she is such an inspiration to me with everything. And it was funny. I was reading that the other day and I'm like, where are her kids in all of this? Because she's a mother. Her children must have been with her. I don't know. Maybe they had nannies or something back then. I mean, she seemed to be
okay. So
wealthy.
this is where my lifestyle comes in, because the Proverbs 31 woman also is, I've tried to pattern my life after her, because just within the Proverbs 31 woman, there is enough to do. She's a businesswoman. She has maidens. So it goes back to is not seeing the Bible through Western eyes, but the Bible has a different, the life of Jesus and seeing all the different people that he healed means so much more living here, seeing people on the street that are mad, that are crazy. And I'm sorry if that might not be the politically correct word. I'm not sure what you all say in the States. We say a mad person here, or a crippled person. And so she probably lived in a village like how I live. So obviously this is, like I said, this is my lifestyle. And I do have, like, right now my kids are with my mother-in-law and my sister-in-law, and they could be swimming. I'm not sure. It's very quiet. I don't hear any splashing out of the pool. But I have a more of a village mindset, because we all kind of live together, and it's for me a very beautiful thing. My sister-in-law and I actually today were just talking about the benefits of living in a village, and how, what a blessing it is that my kids get to grow up and in the morning run to their grandma to get their tea and sit on her veranda and sit and chit chat with her. And it doesn't have to be a negative thing to live in close proximity to either your blood family or your in-laws. It does not have to be a negative thing, and how beneficial it is for my children to grow up like that. So I'm guessing the Proverbs 31 woman did have a village that she, and I have my Proverbs 31 as bookmarked so I can reference it. You just go through the things that she did. She seeks wool, flax, works willingly with her hands. She brings her food from far. She rises while it's still night. So she was up early in the morning. She gives meat to her household and a portion to her maidens. So she had staff and she took care of them. She bought fields. She was strong. She had merchandise. Her candle goeth not out by night. So she still wasn't like in bed by 4. She was still working, it seems like. She stretcheth out her hand to the poor. It's there. So she was extending herself. She dressed her family well in scarlet. She maketh herself coverings of tapestry. Her clothing is silk and purple. She was not dressed in rags. She looked tidy. And on top of this, her husband is known in the gates when he sitteth among the elders of the land. Sorry, there's one more thing in my mom's Bible, which is the Thompson chain. There's one verse I never read it until I got my mom's Bible after she passed away. Okay, verse 11. The heart of her husband doth safely trust in her, so that he shall have no need of spoil. So I always just read that like she's not wasteful, but in my mom's Thompson chain, my mom circled it and wrote possessions. And I was like, oh, so I mean, obviously I am making an assumption here about this verse, okay? But what that says to me is like her husband was a respected person in the community. He was sitting at the city gates, which we know from ancient literature, that's where the men gathered, right? And she was providing an income. Now, I'm not saying it's a sole income. I'm definitely not saying that she was the only one providing an income, but she did contribute. So it's not wrong. And I just find sometimes in conservative Christian culture, maybe it's looked down upon if women work. It doesn't matter if it's working in the home, providing an income, or outside of the home and providing an income. I see it as biblical. So because it's their possession. So anyways, I'm not a Greek scholar. I didn't research that before this podcast, but that's what my mom has circled. So she got it from somewhere. And I really feel like that's really important. There's so much inspiration for us just within the Proverbs 31 woman. And then another book we can talk about at the end if you'd like to see them all together, but you asked for book recommendations. So this is called Women of the Word by Amy Edwards, and there's 3 volumes. I think you've talked about this. This is just volume 1, but one of the first ladies that I studied was Abigail. Oh my goodness. Okay, so she didn't have modern conveniences. No oven, no refrigerator. And she went to David with 200 loaves, 2 bottles of wine, 5 sheep ready dressed. So she had slaughtered them and they were ready to go. 5 sheep, not like 5 kilos of meat, 5 sheep.
Okay, one sec. One sec. I got to insert. And here we are. Oh man, I got to make dinner tonight. It takes me 30 minutes. Okay.
Exactly. Yeah, 5 sheep ready and dressed, 5 measures of parched corn, whatever that measurement is, 100 clusters of raisins. Again, 100 clusters of raisins. That means she's grown them, she's picked them, she's dried them. And 200 cakes of figs. Again, she's grown them, she's dried them, she's made them into a cake of figs. And I was just within the Word of God. You can see that women work hard, and they didn't even have modern conveniences. Yeah, maybe they had staff to help them. That's besides the point. Someone's organizing it. Someone's making sure it gets done. We were made to work and to work hard. I mean, I know, like I said, there's seasons, there's times. There are times, but just in general, as an overarching theme of our life. Yeah. You just shouldn't just sit back.
I love it. Yes. So going back to Proverbs 31, like you said, that's probably one of my favorite chapters in the Bible. And again, so inspirational to me. And like you said, you probably have more of an understanding because you are actually living very similarly to that, like with the community and the staff and things like that. So for me, taking inspiration, it looks different. And we have to remember that in our American culture, it's going to look different, but the principles, and that's the key about the Bible. Okay, it's the principles are there. It's not going to look exactly the same, but the principles for working hard, earning an extra income to help our family. And again, I'm not saying that as in you have to. I'm not saying that. Okay.
No.
I think there is something to say about, because I'm cracking up here because as far as my husband teases me all the time about earning an extra income because I'm like, yes, I want to help our family. And it's like, so measly the amount of money that comes in, but that's okay. At least it's something. But I do want to point out too, like when you compare Proverbs 31 to and look at Titus 2 and take those together, a woman is a keeper of the home. Biblically, she's to be a keeper of the home. When you look at Proverbs 31, is the Proverbs 31 woman keeping the home? Yeah, she is. Her home is well taken care of. So I think it's very important when we consider doing the more priorities. Again, number 1, is your husband, your children, are your people, is your home, is that taken care of? And then, yes, it is. I've kept my home well. I'm doing what the Lord has given me to do. When you do that well, then he will give you more to do. So I think it's very important. It's not right to have a job that literally takes over your life and you don't have time for your children or your husband or anything else. That's wrong biblically. So you have to have the balance. Is it wrong to work as a wife, mother? No. But is it wrong to let that work completely take over your life so that you can't take care of your home? Yes. So the balance is so important.
Yeah, the third book I also wanted to share along, because one of your viewers had a question of books, is A Woman After God's Own Heart. And I read this sometime in 2019, and that prioritizes our hearts and our our priorities. And like you said, you have to get your priorities straight. Yeah, that's just number one, because God can't give you anything extra unless so this is another one. A Woman After God's Own Heart by Elizabeth George is my third and final book recommendation on this topic, because it is important to get those things squared away first. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's one of the things on Faithful and Flourishing on both the website and on Instagram. That's what we start with, nailing down your priorities, because that is number one in your life. And we haven't mentioned number one is your relationship with the Lord. But if you don't have your relationship with the Lord, right, then he can't lead you and guide you in what you are supposed to do and what you can take on and what you shouldn't take on and things like that. So yes, so important.
Yes.
Okay, we can finally get on to another question.
Okay.
Do you find social media and screens to be a hindrance to getting things accomplished?
Of course, I'm human. There's doom scroll. Of course there is. So yeah, I do usually do my doom scrolling at night. And usually, I read a quote years ago: make your life so interesting that your phone doesn't have, it's not an attraction to you.
Good.
And that's one thing I still love about the culture here is generally when you're getting together with friends, there's no phones out. And I treasure and value that so much. I actually have to, as far as sharing my life, I have to actually work on it. Like yesterday, I did a real day in the life. It takes a lot of effort to take those photos, So I just think just to fill your life with fun and interesting things and love your life with all of your heart and just be so thankful for it. And then the phone is not as big of a priority. But of course I doom scroll. I'm a human and I'm a modern mom. So I usually do my doom scrolling at night for sure.
Yeah. There's I'm in the middle of a book right now called Glow Kids. Have you heard of that book?
No.
Man, that is it's pretty crazy how addictive our screens are. So I definitely agree. I know. And sometimes do you place boundaries on yourself on your phone usage? Do you do that for yourself?
I have. You can set a reminder, I think it is, within Instagram, and it says you've reached your limit for the day. Do you want to turn it off? Remind yourself one more time, whatever. Remind yourself in 15 minutes. So then every time you hit remind me in 15 minutes, you're like, oh, I'm an idiot today. Yeah.
I do that too.
So there's that. And then there's some days when, especially on the weekends, not religiously, but I will just act. Well, see, also, I got to show you too. Don't judgy yourself. I've got two phones. So this is my Zambian phone. That's just like a cheap Android that has my WhatsApp and my emails and stuff like that. So this is how you can communicate with me on a day-to-day basis. And this is my fun phone. This is I call it my work phone. So this has Instagram and Facebook and all that kind of stuff. So I have the luxury of just turning it off and putting it in a drawer. So if you can afford that, I highly recommend, if you can somehow squeeze in a cheap phone just for your day-to-day communications, and then keep all the other stuff on the other phone and the nice phone. Highly recommend. So I do have the luxury of, this is my USA number, and put it in the drawer and close the drawer and don't get it out.
Inside. That's a good idea. I mean, you could simply do like a flip phone for that.
I've heard of people doing that.
Yeah. I do that same thing as far as the Instagram, have the little what is it called?
An app limit, I think.
Yeah, the limits. Yeah, I put the limits. And you know what else I do is on my home screen, I put my you can put how much time you spent on your phone.
Oh.
And yes, so that's on, as soon as I turn my phone on, it's right there. So I can be like, oh my goodness, I've spent 58 minutes on my phone screen already. Then you can look and see what it was. Instagram, everything is right there in my face. And then did you mention you delete oh no, you said it's on a separate phone. So for me, I completely delete everything for the weekends, because but actually even during the week too, if I'm not actively posting, I just completely delete it, because that extra step of having to put it back on my phone will stop me from getting on there, in the middle of the day. But phone boundaries. What is our world coming to? Okay. Do you find it difficult to keep up with your home and cooking and cleaning, etc., while focusing on SAKAMANA?
No, I mean, because I do have a staff, and I do have a village. I've like my in-laws can help me if I, like yesterday I had to go to town and do a whole bunch of SAKAMANA things. So the kids were absolutely fine. They had friends playing, swimming, and all of that. So obviously I'm super blessed in that regards. And a lot of it just on a personal level with American Mom is just exactly what you talk about with on your Instagram account, which is planning. I still have to plan my meals. My family doesn't eat if I don't plan something. And I do still cook, and I do still bake and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it just comes down to planning. Absolutely.
Yeah. I think it's neat. You mentioned Abigail. So she most likely had a staff to help her, but she was the one that was, coming up with everything. She probably was in the kitchen working with them. And it's same thing with the Proverbs 31 woman. She had a staff, but she was working alongside of her staff. I think it's so wrong when we could even do this with our children. And, it's, hey, I want you to do this, 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 and this, and this, and I'm going to go sit on the couch and plop on my phone. Well, that's not right. We should be working right alongside our staff or our children or whatever. So did we get away from that question? Oh, so yeah, cooking and cleaning. Yeah, I think it would be so nice to have a maid. But like you were saying, we can't compare. Those who compare themselves among themselves are not wise, the Bible says. So we can look at your life and gain inspiration. And I can look at my life and say, okay, my life is not set up in the same way as yours is. So Lord, give me wisdom for how I can set up my life in such a way that I can fit in this, extra thing. And so for me, cleaning, I absolutely despise cleaning. That's the thing that goes. So what we've done, and I've been talking about this actually this last month, is set up like, okay, what is like the bare bones that like the essential tasks that need to get done? Toilets, floors, maybe some minimal dusting. Like I could get away with doing just the few things so that I still have room to work on whatever else. And then coming up with a time. Okay, there's no time. Well, do your children have naps or take quiet time? That's when I work. I literally have 2 hours a day. And that's and I know in my mind, okay, that's my work time. That's when I can work. And that's when it fits in. And it's so nice having that, like, okay, so talking about getting on the phones and stuff like that. It's nice in my mind in the morning. I can say, okay, I know I have 2 hours in the afternoon to respond to Instagram messages, to put up my posts, to do this, that, and the other. So I don't have to do it now, because right now it's time for me to focus on making breakfast or on homeschooling or whatever. But I know that time is coming. So it's really nice. Like you mentioned planning. I don't like planning, but that's the way that life runs smoothly. I don't have to have everything written out in the exact order, but just knowing, okay, what comes next? When am I going to fit in work? When am I going to fit in cleaning? When am I going to fit in homeschooling? I feel like homeschooling is just, we try to homeschool all year, but I find that having the summer off is just like, that's what I needed off. Cause it's like, okay, can I just have some time to do some other stuff here? But it's just there, somehow it all works out and it does get done. So.
Yeah, and I highly recommend having things like, I know a lot of Americans do like Taco Tuesday or whatever, having those built-in brain breaks. Like for us, we have Saturday night soup, which is soup and bread. And then Sunday, yep, we always have Saturday night soup. So if you come over, then that's what we're having. And then Sunday is a big Sunday lunch with the roast chicken and all of that. And then you kind of just go from there. I don't know. I have a different system that's irrelevant for this conversation. But yeah, we just a plan. I actually don't mind planning. I like planning. The difference here is though that sometimes you plan and it just things go askew, but it is good to plan because it kind of just gives you a mental break. It frees up brain space for sure.
Yes, you're right. And brain space, it fatigues us. If you're always trying to, last minute come up with, I don't know what, like, oh shoot, I got to clean this and what am I going to do for dinner? And it's just stress on your brain, really. And that's actually not healthy. If we're going to go back to that conversation, everything can go back to health. Okay.
For sure.
All right. How do you get and stay inspired to serve?
Okay, so this is another thing, like I have to say, I don't know how this fits with American culture, but we have a family policy of break out of the country once a year, and like a real chill break, because it's like we kind of, because like I said earlier, like our life does shut down, from around 5 or 6 p.m. Like life really slows down. But on the other hand, with us running our own farm and all of that, my husband can have to deal with the problem at 11 o'clock at night. I mean, a few weeks ago, I am such a heavy sleeper. A few weeks ago, I heard knocking on our window, and I was like, what is going on? So it took me a little while to wake up, and the watchmen were knocking because, we don't have power for most of the day here now. We have about 6 hours of power a day. And at that specific time, we didn't have power at night. And they had run out of fuel for the generator, because it's hard to gauge how much fuel you need, because if there's a lot of equipment on the generator, then it uses more fuel. If there's less equipment on, then it uses less fuel. And it was just hard to gauge. And, they ran out of fuel. It's just a real normal life occurrence. So my husband's up in the middle of the night having to go get more diesel, and
Wow.
so totally not a big deal, but you kind of work 24/7. There's really no times off. I mean, once we were going out for dinner and got a phone call at the start of the dinner, 2 of our employees had been in a serious bike accident and were hospitalized. And what can we do? You're constantly dealing with things like that. So we have a family policy that we get out of the country and we go to our favorite little beach town in South Africa, where we can completely chill out. We can completely rest. We turn off our phones, only check our messages once a day, and just focus on the kids, focus on our walk with the Lord, and just rest. And I don't know really how that fits in with American culture, because like y'all do have things already, like you have, county fairs and putt-putt golfing and sports events and things like that, where you have these times where you're relaxing in that regards, whereas we don't really have that. We do have fun things sometimes, but it's just not as frequent.
Mhm.
So it's just really important for us to rest. And I know I've heard different people say, I remember there's this one marriage pastor my husband and I listened to a while ago, and he just talked about even when he and his wife were newly married and they didn't have a lot of money, they still prioritized getting away every, I think, quarter for like 2 nights or something. And how they stayed in the cheapest hotel, and it was so cheap, but they still prioritized their marriage. So I think it still can be done. Obviously there's budgets, and sometimes people don't have family nearby to watch their kids. So obviously everyone's different, but just trying to prioritize rest. I'm a big believer. That's another thing I'm really passionate about, is rest. Because I think as hard as we were made to work, I also believe that it's important to rest. So yeah. And it looks different for everybody, but that's how it looks for us. Yeah.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think another thing too is for us here in the States, we are running so hard and fast to keep up with culture that rest is so important to even to, okay, so Sundays, people talk about Sabbath and things like that. Sundays are a wonderful day if you can prioritize that rest. But I know a lot of people are in ministry and Sundays don't feel restful. Like we're obviously prioritizing the Lord and things like that, but you're still, serving, which is good. That's what we're supposed to do. But sometimes it doesn't feel very restful when you're home for, 45 minutes on a Sunday afternoon and you got to turn right around and go back to church and got to be there for choir and for band and, all these things. And, but being able to say, okay, every Saturday afternoon or all day Saturday or whatever, like just being able to, again, you have to fight for it. Like we were talking about, rest is very important, but we have to fight for it in our culture. And our cultures are so different. Like you were saying, it just, even your Sunday afternoon lunch with your family, that sounds so restful. But you know what? We here can fight for something like that here. I've heard of people doing actually they call it actual Sabbath, and they turn off, their internet and everything for 24 hours. If you do something like that, that's wonderful. I know for me, I think something that's very important as far as rest is to do something that's actually restful. So if you're like, okay, the kids are going down for a nap, woohoo, I have 2 hours to scroll. That is not restful. you come away from being on your phone, your brain is more wired and activated. So you have to decide, okay, what is rest to me? Okay, you always hear when your baby naps, you need to nap or whatever. So if a nap is restful, that's wonderful. For me, to me, restfulness is working on my like all the different PDFs and things that I make for my business. That's restful to me. Like I get really inspired when I do stuff like that. But also taking time away. Like one thing, I love listening to audiobooks and things like that. And I get really inspired. But sometimes the best inspiration happens when you just turn everything off and you're like, okay, I'm not listening to podcasts or audiobooks or anything. I'm not getting on social media for a week, because you need that quietness. And when that quietness is there, sometimes you get that inspiration. So I love that you mentioned rest, because that is really important. And that is when inspiration comes. You can get inspiration from everything. Like we talked about the Proverbs 31 woman. But the thing is, we can literally get inspiration all day long and never apply it. And if we're always like, oh, I gotta read, listen to this, watch all these reels on Instagram, and we're getting all this info and all this inspiration, but we are never actually going to do. You just need to stop and just go do whatever it is you're getting inspired. So I remember that when E was, I don't know, 2 or 3, and I really wanted to just do something extra, and I was reading all these books. I'm like, okay, this is what I'm gonna do. And one day it just dawned on me, like, okay, I just need to just do it. It's really fun getting inspired, but I just need to stop and just go do it. So,
yes.
Okay. So the last question was, do you have any book recommendations for this topic? So you mentioned those, but do you want to just kind of go through them all together? That Even Exile book, that was so good. I love that book.
Yeah, so the first one's Even Exile by Rebecca Merkel. Highly recommend if you don't get put off by the start. And then it's just interesting because she talks about like feminism and when feminism peaked, and even back into the 1700s in the Victorian era, how there was a peak in feminism because the women were bored. They were made to think that they just need to sit in the parlor and do like cross stitching and like needlework. And she was like, you get bored. So so once I stuck with it, and then all of a sudden opened up this whole world for me. So that's the first one. The second one, Prioritizing Your Walk and with the Lord and Your Family, A Woman After God's Own Heart by Elizabeth George. This is what I call one of my mentor books when I feel like I need to be recentered on some encouragement. I pick up this book. And then this is one book of a set of 3. I'm not even sure where you can buy these in America. My mom gave these to me, but Women of the Word by Amy Edwards. And there's 3 volumes. They're spiral bound. She just digs really deep into women of the Bible. And I've loved the different women I've learned about through her Bible study. Yeah, it's been really good.
Those are all of those. Oh, I haven't done the Elizabeth George book, but I've done some of her books before, but those are all good. Since we were talking about the Proverbs 31, woman so much, and again, such an inspiration, I wanted to show this book. I don't know, can you read this? Is this the right way? I was just wondering if this is going to be the right direction. But it's God's wisdom for little girls, and it goes over it's not, I don't know what Bible version it is, but it just goes over each verse basically, and it's in like a poem. But honestly, the pictures are so beautiful. And I will say, so we basically do a Proverbs a day, either by ourselves or together. And every 31st, we will do, and sometimes on the 30th, because we love Proverbs 31 so much, we will do Proverbs 31 together, my daughter and I. And she's almost 11. She's going to be 11 this month. And she always says, Mom, can I go grab that Proverbs 31 book? And she looks at this book while I read the proverb aloud. That's how good it is. My 11-year-old, and even me, I love just the illustrations are just so beautiful. I love this so much. Anyways, so I wanted to just, since we talked so much about the Proverbs 31 woman, it starts with raising our girls that way. Our girls are not going to be hard workers and diligent as grown-ups if they're not taught that now. And so this is just really enjoyable. So since we were talking about that, I thought, you know what, I'm going to show that book because we actually just did it yesterday. So, and she loves it. And I do too, actually. Anyways, such a good conversation. Any last thoughts?
No, not at all. Just I actually was thinking of different women in my own life who have inspired me. Some practical examples. I think that was one of the things you mentioned to me. So I was thinking of some different women who've inspired me on a practical level. I heard of one pastor's wife. She liked to be the zone where if the mom needs to go to the grocery store, then she has an open house to drop the kids, so she can run errands. Maybe that's your strength. I heard of another pastor's wife who she would say, if you're making a supper and it's easy to double it, why not just double it, then put it into a foil container and then give it to a widow or a widower or someone, elderly person who needs food or just something like that. So I try to do that now and again. It's really easy to double food. And I have to say that's one of the things that I like to do. Also, just looking on a practical level, obviously, I feel very out of touch with American society. But like my aunt goes and volunteers at a homeless shelter, and then they also have something with a work skill program. Look in your area for different places to help. Obviously, there's your church within churches. I don't know. Everyone's church is different. Everyone's church situation is different. So it's going to look different for everybody. But just start asking yourself, who's on my street? Start with your street. Who's on my street that I can bless? Widen your, open up your table, so to speak. Invite people over that are not within your social circle or your churchy circle, and invite people over. That's one thing my husband and I like to do is invite community members over for we call it a grown-up dinner. The kids get their PJs early and watch a movie, and we have a fancy 3-course dinner, and just try to be a blessing and get to know people in our community. So look for ways to do that. Just look for the people on your street and get to know your neighbors. I guess for Americans, I'd be hosting a barbecue or something like that. It's different. Yeah, it's all different. But just look for practical examples, because you just have to start small. You can't look at starting big things like a nonprofit. It doesn't work that way. You got to start in your house, organize your life, and then just expand just a little bit. Make a meal. Be the person who is always taking a meal. If you like to cook. Some people don't like to cook. I personally don't mind. I try to make it a point when my friends are coming back from their furlough, schedule a meal to take to my friends. It's a really easy thing to do. And it is such a blessing to come home after long flights and there's a meal ready. Okay, like I said, I feel very out of touch with American society, but also friends. I try to be the place where the kids, it's a fun place and a safe place for the kids to play. Just start small and do what you can do. Do what you're already doing and just expand it a little bit. And then from there, the Lord will expand you again. And then the Lord will expand you again. Then you look back on your life after 10 years and you're like, wow, I can't believe I'm doing that. Wow.
Yes.
But you don't go from mom of littles to, corporate president. More than likely, there's a lot of steps in between. You know what I mean? Start small and be gentle on yourself and give yourself grace, and know that it's just part of the process. Yeah.
And that is the beauty of life, is the growing process. I know, so especially if we're perfectionists, I know I can tend towards that way. It's just like, I want to be this, right? I want to be 100,000 followers on Instagram and blessing a bajillion people, right now. And it's like, that is not how life works. And typically if the get rich quick schemes or whatever, that it doesn't work that way. It's continual growth, line upon line, every day being faithful. And along with the lines with what you were saying, just having the others mindset. So we talk about this all the time, but inside of our home, but also anytime we leave the home, our prayer is, Lord, make me a blessing. So how can I bless? I'm going to the grocery store. How can I bless someone? Oh, there's an old lady that needs a cart. Here, do you want my cart? Or can I put the cart away for you? Or, just being a blessing. And the thing is, when your mindset changes to be a blessing, then opportunities come to you. The opportunities were always there, but we were missing them. But when you change your mindset, and when you change your priorities, and when you ask the Lord, make me a blessing, they're there. they're always there. So
Yeah.
anyways, such a great conversation. Can you tell us where people can find you? I know you're on Instagram, and also like where can we find your SAKAMANA shop? And not a shop, you don't do a shop anymore. You've closed the shop, but your SAKAMANA, there's a place to donate, right? Or can you tell us about that?
Sure. So you can find me on Instagram. My personal Instagram account about just my daily life is at on a farm in Africa. And then the SAKAMANA Instagram is SAKAMANA, which is SAKAMANA, Zambia. And then our website is sakamana.org. So it's SAKAMANA.org. And that's where you can find a little bit more about us and the donate button and all of that. So,
okay. Yeah. And real quick, can you tell us what SAKAMANA means?
Yeah, SAKAMANA means to care for in our local language, and just that's what God's called us to do. It's just to care for the people that are living around us. It's just that simple. Yeah. It's not complicated.
So good. All right, Rebecca, thank you so much for such a wonderful, it really was such a good chat. I'm telling you, doing interviews are some of my favorite things because I learned so much from the people who are growing. We're all growing together. So thank you.
Thanks for having me. I hope you have a good day.